In this example, we're going to graph one cycle of the periodic function shown, and then we're also going to state the amplitude, period, phase shift, and axis of symmetry. Okay, well, the first thing we need to do is to do a little algebraic manipulation so that we can determine easily the values of A, K, D, and C. So we're going to take that positive 4, and we're going to kick it to the far right. And we're also going to factor out the 1/3 in the input. So the amplitude is going to be equal to the absolute value of A. So the absolute value of -1 is 1. The period is going to be 360 degrees divided by the absolute value of K. So 360 degrees over 1/3 is 1080 degrees. Now you might wonder, why are we using degrees here? And that's because they're used in the question. Okay. The phase shift will be 180 degrees to the left, and that's from this value being 180 degrees. And finally, we're going to have a axis of symmetry at y = 4. Okay, now that's part of what the question asked us to find. It's also worth noting that the period is, that the key interval is going to be 1/4 of the period. It's always the period divided by 4. 1080 degrees divided by 4 is equal to 270 degrees. So that'll be our key interval in this question. Okay, so we write some of that information down. We know our parent function will be y = negative cos x. And if you're not sure why, it's because there's a negative coefficient in front of cos in the question. And our period is 1080 degrees. Our K value, our amplitude is 1. Our axis of symmetry is at y = 4. And our phase shift is going to be at is 180 degrees to the left. So our D value is going to be negative 180 degrees, because in the original question, remember that you're changing the sign right there, and so it's going to be a negative value. Okay, so going back to where we are now, we also want to say to ourselves, what's the behavior of a negative cos curve? And a negative cos curve has 5 key points, therefore 4 key intervals. They all do. And it starts at the bottom, goes up to the maximum, comes back down to the bottom. So it's got these 5 key points shown. Okay, interesting. Well, the 5 x coordinates of the 5 key points are always the same no matter what our parent function is. The first one is D, the second one is D plus a key interval, the third one is D plus 2 key intervals, the fourth one has an x coordinate of D plus 3 key intervals, and the fifth one has a x value of D plus 4 key intervals, or in other words, D plus a period. Now, when we're talking about a parent function of negative cos x, we see that the second and fourth points are on the axis of symmetry. So the second and fourth key points are going to have y values of c. The first key point is below the axis of symmetry, as is the fifth key point. So those are going to have y values of c minus an amplitude. And the third key point, the one in the middle, that's the one up top. That's one amplitude above the axis of symmetry. So it's c plus an amplitude. Okay? So our D value, as we said, since it's 180 degrees to the left, our D value is negative 180 degrees. Now, when we add when we add a key interval to that, when we add 270 degrees to negative 180 degrees, we get 90 degrees. When we add another 270 degrees to that, because that's another key interval, we get 360 degrees. When we add another key interval to that, we get 630 degrees. And finally, when we add another key interval to that, 630 degrees plus 270 degrees is 900 degrees. Now, what are our y values? Well, our first y value is going to be c minus an amplitude. Well, c is equal to 4, and the amplitude is equal to 1. So c minus an amplitude, 4 minus 1 is 3. C is equal to 4. C plus an amplitude is 5. C is 4 again, and C minus an amplitude is back down to 3. Okay, so now we want to know, how do we scale our x axis? Well, what we can do is look at every one of our x coordinates and ask ourselves, what's the greatest common factor of them all? The greatest common factor of all of those is 90 degrees. So we're going to scale our x axis where every one of these horizontal squares is equal to 90 degrees. And we're going to scale our y-axis where every one of those vertical squares is equal to 1 unit. There's 1 unit there, and there's 90 degrees down here. Now, negative 180 degrees, comma 3 will be right about there. Positive 90 degrees, positive 4 is right about there. Positive 360 degrees and positive 5 is here. Positive 630 degrees, positive 4 is right about there. And finally, positive 900 degrees, positive 3 is right about here. And then we do our best job of graphing that curve. We want to make our curve look classy, so we're not going to use straight, rigid lines. We're going to do our best to make it curve. It's not too easy on this tablet to do that, but there we go. And that's what it looks like. And that's our final answer. Now, if we want it, because it only asked for, and it should stop here. It shouldn't kind of extend over the way I just did there. Now, if we wanted to graph more than one cycle, then we would do our best to make sure it continues along in the same general way. Okay.